I like to think of the Torah as the ultimate revolutionary document, containing both overt and very subtle messages for those seeking radical social and cultural change. So, what in Torah ignites the fire of political rebellion and fuels revolution? First, for the overt. One of my mentors in Jewish education, Mel Riesfield, always stressed that 90% of education is repeating the main messages. The Torah commands fairness to the stranger no less than 47 times. 5 times it specifies the reason, stating, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. In other words, don't behave like the people who enslaved you. A more subtle, yet no less important example of the central revolutionary method in Torah is found in this week's portion, Chukat, which teaches that contact with the dead makes you ritually impure, and that ritually impure Israelites can't enter the Mishkan, the sanctuary, without first being sprinkled with the ashes of a para aduma, a red cow. Now, what's the connection between this strange passage about rituals not practiced since the destruction of the temple and cultural and social revolution? Well, recall that religion in Egypt mummified bodies to preserve them for their journey to the underworld. The pharaohs of the New Kingdom in Egypt enlisted all the resources in order to build enormous monuments, mortuary temples, to glorify and worship them after death, and elaborate tombs to serve as passageways for them to the underworld. The rules presented in Chukat, on the other hand, create an aversion to contact with the dead, particularly among the Kohanim. In Egypt, laborers spent their lives preparing temples and tombs, and priests were tasked with overseeing ritual mummification and entombment following death. By instructing the Kohanim that being in proximity to or contact with a dead body causes ritual impurity, the Torah is preventing, in effect, the culture of Egypt from following the Israelites into the Promised Land. The rest of the purification codes and rituals performed by priests were taught back in the book of Leviticus. So, what's this passage about the impurity of the dead bodies doing here in the middle of Numbers? It's actually meant to be an introduction to a major new theme in Torah. Last week's portion, Korach, takes place in the second year after the Exodus. This week, the book of Numbers abruptly skips 38 years forward to the final days of the leadership team, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, who led the Israelites out of Egypt and through the desert. Chukat opens with the rules and warnings about contact with corpses. And the next thing that occurs is a test case. Miriam dies and is buried at Kadesh in Midbar Tzim, thought by some to be near Petra in Jordan. The Torah, though, mentions no tomb built for her and no marking place for her grave. Providing water had been Miriam's job. So right after her death, a water shortage ensues, and the people complain to Moses and Aaron. You know the story. Under pressure, Moses hits the rock with his staff. The water flows out, resulting in the pronouncement that he and Aaron, like their sister, will die in the wilderness. Soon afterwards, the Torah describes Aaron's death. Moses marches him and his son Eleazar up a mountain. Moses removes Aaron's beautiful priestly clothes and places them on Eleazar. Now recall at the end of Genesis, the Torah states explicitly that Jacob and Joseph were mummified. Prominent Israelites who died in Egypt followed Egyptian custom. Here the Torah tells us that Aaron died naked, his body left to decompose. There'll be nothing left to sanctify, nothing to venerate, no journey to a mythical underworld. And soon it'll be Moses' turn to die. But first, among the hundreds of commandments that Moses pronounces in Deuteronomy, there's one forbidding the building of monuments to the dead. And he gives a reason, because God hates monuments. The message? God abhors the culture of Egypt. So please, no monuments for me or anyone else. The act of climbing Mount Nebo alone to be buried in an unknown tomb overlooking the Promised Land is actually, for Moses, the completion of the social and cultural revolution that he led in his lifetime. In Egypt, the pharaohs of the New Kingdom oppressed their nation and enslaved foreigners in order to build great monuments that immortalized them after death. the Torah is instilling in the Israelites a new culture for the Promised Land, where leaders would be dedicated to pursuing justice for the living. Shavua Tov, Etchet.